in terms of the canyon, still having those conversations, and then finally COVID-19 and how all that plays out. So that's my quick update, folks, and go from there.
Will we be having any hearings on any of these during the next week, or any kind of action at all?
On these, no. I just looked on the speaker's bill, 2004, nothing scheduled yet, but certainly on top of it.
Okay, great. Right, why don't we then move over? Does anyone have any questions for Justin? No? Okay. Why don't we just move over to the priority bills then? Go ahead, Courtney, you'd lead this one.
Actually, if I could interrupt just for a second, because I'm still new at this, so I'm going to ask new questions. The sheets that we get with the priority bills, how is that formulated? Is that something that comes from Jason, or is it a group of people that put these together, or what?
Yes, Councilor Lewis. Our staff team assembled here and on our agenda today by name, if you're interested, checking in. Our staff team does quite a lot of work across the state or locally.
Hi, I got it. I'm on now. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson's present now. Okay, go ahead.
Just barely.
So our staff team meets together and considers all of the implications of the bills as proposed and prepares an analysis for the legislative committee briefings. And then we really look to your direction for adjustments to that position statement or adjustments to the position or the priority that we've put forward as a recommendation. And then we take that to the council as a whole for approval.
Right. Okay. That's what I thought. Thanks.
And they, if I could add in there, they sort of filter their recommendations through our policies that the council has set.
Yeah.
Yes. And we're also mindful, with Justin's help and Nicole's help from Perseverance, we're mindful of what might be moving, because we know that we're all working with limited time. And so we try to just really focus our attention in these conversations on things that may be moving forward. And so with that, we have a collection of bills today. We tried to group them around the subject matter so that we could have one conversation about the collection of ideas and use your time effectively. The first few bills, there are 4 of them, and they refer to preemptions for local land use for the purposes of providing sheltering or affordable housing. And so those bills are, and I'm going to ask Eunice Kim to be available and Jessica Blakely from Salem Housing to be available to answer any questions you may have about those position statements, which is a cue for you all to turn on your cameras. House Bill 2006, House Bill 2008, House Bill 3261, and Senate Bill 8. Normally, the city has a tendency to oppose preemption of local authority, but in this case, we wondered whether you might be amenable to that kind of preemption for the purposes of sheltering and affordable housing. So that's what we're hoping to discuss with you today.
Okay.
Can you repeat those bill numbers, please, Courtney?
Yes, they're on our agenda. House Bill 2006.
Sorry, I was looking at the bill list.
I'm not seeing that on my list at all. So I'd like to hear what it is.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know how that was overlooked, but
Well, my list starts with 2000.
Oh, no, it's on
It is on the list. It's towards the
Third
bottom.
page.
It's not in
Third
order.
page.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's the last bill reviewed, and it's emergency shelter. It's on the bottom of the last page. Sorry about that.
The last page, okay.
We'll make those corrections.
Okay, yeah, if you're going to put them in with subject, no, I still don't have it. I don't see it.
Okay, Eunice, could you do House Bill 2006 for us?
Sure. So my understanding of this bill is that it's the companion bill to the 2004 that provides the funding for NAV centers. And it's an extension essentially of the 2020 the special session that would allow supersiding of emergency shelters. So you wouldn't have to go through zoning, for example, to site a shelter.
Councilor Hoy?
Thank you. So this bill was up at the same time 2004 was up. So a number of folks spoke on both. And I can tell you that City of Eugene, Medford, Bend, McMinnville, also Josephine County, Lane County, Deschutes County, and the housing authorities of Oregon all testified in support of this bill. And also Jimmy Jones from Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency testified in support of this bill. So just for what that's worth.
Thank you.
So what do you want from us then, Courtney? Just rubber stamp what you've done? No, I mean, really, I mean, is that what you need?
Well, there's no recommendation on
They haven't
this.
made a recommendation.
Okay,
Eunice, it looks like we may have overlooked that piece in the, that may not have carried forward in the packet. Would you like to just review the position? I think what we're hoping.
what is our position on it then? Nothing? Watch?
It says not reviewed.
Apologies.
Okay.
I think our hope or intent was to really just ask for your perspective on whether the city wanted to be in support of preempting local land use for the purpose of affordable housing and or sheltering. And it sounds like there would be support from among you, and we would just put those bills as support, and one or two being staff could provide testimony, and one would be obviously someone from the mayor or council's office could. Yes, Councilor Roy?
To clarify, this is really about emergency shelter, not, there's anything about affordable housing in it, is there?
I've tried to group all the bills that would preempt local authority for those joint purposes. So there are some affordable housing ones as well on that list.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought we were just speaking about 2006 at the moment.
Eunice, would you like to address the question?
Sure. Would you like me to walk through the other bills as well? Some of them do housing, some of them do, or do you want to take them one at a time?
One thing I want to hear is what is your recommended position on 2006? I'm just not sure I'm getting it.
We didn't make a recommendation on this one. We would be fine, I think, supporting it. We have had some shelters under the 2020 bill cited through this provision.
And this is the one that allows emergency shelter
Yes,
siting
right.
without
Going through land use.
going through land use.
You know, I'll recommend that we support this. I know how sensitive the local land use laws are and the folks in town, but as we've been trying over the last 2 years to find shelter, quite frankly, anywhere we can find it, especially on a short term, we should utilize that opportunity.
Yeah.
I concur.
Does it mention, as Jim said, short term, does it mention permanent versus, does it describe short term?
I think it includes, that's a good question. I can go back to the bill. The siting authority though would expire July 1, 2022. So it's not indefinite. Let me circle back to you on that.
Okay. Well, I think, I don't know, how do you feel, Chris and Tom, that this have some sort of limitation on it that we can point to? That it's not a permanent land use change to this kind of housing, okay?
It's a 2-year kind of more.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Are you? Okay, good. Why don't we just say we support that then?
Thank you. The other three bills that are listed on this topic, House Bill 2008, House Bill 3261, and Senate Bill 8, relate to the same provision of preempting local land use authority for affordable housing. Would you like to step through each one?
Yeah. So House Bill 2008, I think, is a speaker's bill, and it would require us to allow affordable housing, and it's very specific, it has to be owned by a religious corporation, zoned for use that's not industrial, and contiguous to a property that already allows residential uses. And it would be affordable, so it'd be a 60% of median income. And that's it, for at least 60 years.
Okay, and it leaves in place our ability to do sort of the traditional requirements on health, safety, and welfare in terms of, okay, yeah, Chris?
This seems really specific. I don't quite understand what the point of it is. If it's only by religious organizations, chances are we wouldn't even have any that qualify, given all of the criteria in this. So I don't see given that it has to all be affordable, I'm good with it, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird bill.
I agree the same way. I mean, obviously what this is, the intent is to not, normally if a church has a commercial enterprise, they're paying taxes on that. Like, the what do you call it? The coffee shop over there by the church in North Salem. So I think they're just trying to say you can do this and avoid taxes on this, what could be viewed as a commercial enterprise. And if it is as narrow as, I'm reading things on my cell phone, which is hard for me to read, but when I look at it, it sure seems to me that the goal of this is to encourage religious organizations to be able to provide housing without taxing them, as long as it is for low-income people. So with that specific narrowing of it, it seems like a good idea.
Just so everyone's aware, the city already has an incentive for low-income housing that nonprofits provide, has a housing tax incentive already.
Okay. Good.
Eunice, can you do 3261, please? Thank you.
Sure.
Would you want to move from it? Would you guys like to move from it? So my list says watch. Is that correct?
I think we should support the bill.
I do too. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Okay. We would change that watch to support. And I don't know if priority one says who's going to testify. Is that what that's all about? Yeah,
Right.
I don't know if we have to have a priority one there. I mean, I think, yeah, two would be okay.
Yeah.
Did you want to have a priority 2 on House Bill 2006, which would mean staff would be available to testify? Or
Yeah, and if you hear from a counselor who wants to testify, you just plug them in.
I think they're moving together 2004 and 2006. So I think, and because like I testified in 2004, it would make sense if we can do one testimony for 2 bills, I think,
Yeah.
going forward, because they're moving together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So House Bill 3261 would essentially allow existing motels, hotels to convert to shelters and or affordable housing. So it would take away some of our prohibitions and conditional use requirements in certain zones where we don't currently allow multifamily or shelters.
Sounds good. Good for me.
Yeah, I'm fine with this. We already are using hotels as emergency shelters, so we don't need that permission.
So that would move from watch to support with a 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And the last one that's like that is Senate Bill 8. Eunice?
And I think this is Peter Courtney's bill, and it would require us to allow affordable housing outright in commercial zones on publicly owned property and property owned by religious organizations. Oh, it does have, I'm sorry, there's one other thing. It does have a density height provision that would apply even outside of these zones. And they're still working on an amendment to that, exactly what those densities and heights should be, because it would apply also to single family. So I think that, we've been working with the league and others on.
Yeah, Tom.
language.
Yeah, Eunice, I presume this kind of dovetails with the one we just supported on religious institutions being tax exempt. Just another way to encourage them to do that.
But this also would apply to affordable housing
Well,
just generally.
Oh, I know that,
Oh,
but
okay.
you specifically say religious organizations.
As well,
So,
as well.
yeah. Okay, good.
Should we leave it at a watch? Yeah, Chris.
Does this, like the other one, does this have to all be affordable housing under this, or would it just be partial, or it doesn't seem as specific in the summary?
I think it's all.
Okay.
And my understanding is that the intent behind this is that the use would be allowed, but it would still have to go through the process if there's design or if there's, site plan, zoning, et cetera. It's really just making sure that they don't have to go through a zone change essentially.
Okay. I'm good with it.
Okay. This one? Okay, that would go then to a support.
And would you like it to stay at the staff level or include
Sure.
staff level? Great.
Unless you have a counselor that really comes, there's bills will come up, I'm sure, where a counselor will say, geez, I really would like to speak to that one. You can switch it over if you want.
Okay. When we were speaking about bills and testimony over the summer months, the direction from the committee was to always list things as a one, and then we could always ask for council support in providing testimony, but know that staff would be preparing that work. So we can do it either way. It's entirely your choice.
Okay. Well, let's make sure you all feel fully authorized to get up and testify on most of these. There'll be some where counselors have a specific, I think like the one Tom was interested in, the counselor will have a specific interest in testifying.
Yes.
Or we really want, or you tell us, we really need to have one of you come in and testify to drive it home.
Thank you.
Yeah, especially
next-
Mr. Mayor, especially a bill like this, if it's the Senate President's and he wants to see one of you in there.
Yeah,
We will relay that.
okay.
Thank you, Justin. So the next grouping of bills, there are two bills, and this relates to preemption of local control regarding firearms. And I see that Mark Weinstein is joining us. Thank you. Would you like to guide us a little bit through the ins and outs of what we see here?
Sure. These the House bill and the Senate bill, and I'm sorry, there's many layers of things on my screen here. Let me get to the numbers for you.
I can do that. There's
Sure.
House Bill 3005 and Senate Bill 585.
Thank you. They're the exact same bill. Basically, they are each one or two line bills that seek to repeal all of the firearm preemption language found at ORS 166, 170 through 176, but it only repeals those preemptions. It doesn't do anything regarding, for instance, the state's concealed weapon licensing laws, provisions regarding criminal behaviors regarding carrying or discharging. It's really just removes the state preemption, which seems relatively basic, but as I've noted in the write-up for this, even though it's going to move to local jurisdictions, it will give them, in theory, more opportunity to craft local legislation. Those ordinances are still going to be subject to federal constitutional limits, state constitutional limits, as well as conflict of law issues. So where there is still state legislation regarding things like carrying of concealed weapons, what is criminal versus what is allowed, we're not going to have the ability to craft local ordinances that are in conflict with that or in conflict with the federal law. So that's sort of the legal complexities with it. In talking with other work groups, COG, League of Cities, other colleagues with other cities, I've learned a couple things. One, it's my understanding that similar legislation has been attempted in previous sessions, a few legislative sessions ago, was not successful, and everyone sort of seems the same, has the same concern that should state preemption go away and it give the local jurisdictions the opportunity to regulate more, any attempts at that are going to be met with challenges. both in-person challenges with people engaging in behavior to challenge whatever ordinances we pass, as well as legal challenges. So it could become both financially and resource intensive for the city, but that's just what I've been hearing in my conversations with other jurisdictions.
Roy?
Justin, is there any indication that these bills are moving?
Well, considering they're Senator Burdick's bills, yes, and Clem, one of our own. Yeah, we're kind of in a tight spot. I mean, you heard from Mark the history. They don't tend to go anywhere because it tends to break down with problems within their own caucus, right? Within the Democratic caucus, because of senators like Przonski, who has a big chunk of Douglas County within, his other chunk, which is Eugene. So I don't know. We're kind of in a tight spot, Counselor, because we kind of have to assume they might. But if history tells us anything, they probably won't. But again, Clem's one of our own, so we certainly have to pay attention and keep an eye. We do have watch on here. We do have neutral on here.
Given our discussion about the staff tends to bring us bills that are likely to move, I noticed that these have both been referred to committee, but nothing else has been scheduled. It seems like, I'm not sure why we would need to take a position today on them, given the timing, unless you feel like something could be happening sooner rather than later.
Councillor Hoy, we brought these forward at the last meeting, but deferred to Councillor Anderson for the conversation. And so this is what we're doing now, is just having a conversation about the bill and deciding whether it's worth the city to take a position.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for deferring this from last meeting. I was pretty adamant in my email, and I still feel the same way. I mean, okay, so, and I understand your point, Mark. Where, there's no fences around the courthouse. So we might get sued. We might have somebody, carry a gun downtown Salem after we've banned open carries, or the stuff that happened in front of the beauty salon where the owner has apparently decamped, which is not a bad thing. So what? I mean, we may get a challenge by somebody who is carrying out activities that are potentially harmful to the whole city. So I don't see a fear of somebody suing us or somebody taking even more active measures than they already are. They're walking around in our parks. They're walking through our cities carrying the weapons. I mean, it's already happening. So, I understand Chris's point and Justin's point that is this moving, is this not moving? And so I might be willing to say we could be neutral for now, but if it's moving, I'm voting the strongest one I can vote. I'm voting a 1+.
I have a question, if I could. What's the difference between neutral and watch?
There's not really any difference, except that if we take a neutral position, then we're adopting a position of neutral that through the city council. If we take a position of watch, we're just monitoring, staff are just monitoring and would bring back reports to you periodically, at which point you as a legislative committee could decide to take a position which we would forward to council. So a neutral position, if it's adopted, recognizes that we've seen, heard, considered, and we're remaining Switzerland.
Yeah, and I would think this would fit better under the watch category. It's just me.
Agreed.
And then Mr.
The only
Mayor,
thing I'd really suggest is if we're going to go to watch, that we make sure we're nimble enough that we can take a position. I think that's what Tom's asking for, is if it does suddenly start to move, we may have to get together very quickly just to get to a position. We have councilors that feel real strongly, and I suspect a majority of the council is going to feel real strongly on this. So we need to be prepared for that. And so Courtney, does that work for you you may have to yank us in real quickly to get a position and a chance. Tom's 1+ means we really want somebody from the council there to speak.
I see, Justin, you want to speak, but if I could just take a moment. I would like to just say that this session feels particularly different to me than any session in the past for a variety of reasons. One of which is that the city's being asked more frequently than ever before to take positions on bills from members of our community. And so I would just like to notice that awareness of this bill exists in our community, and we may be asked to take position even if we know pragmatically there may not be utility in it. So
yeah, well, that can happen. Yeah, and we'll have to respond to that if that starts. I mean, if the dozen or 24 people that really, really, really want us to take a position, strike a chord, we can do that. We can respond to it as quickly as we can. I think we ought to be prepared for that. If it really turns out that what we've got is a full-throated call from the community to support this or to oppose it.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, thanks. Let me offer a suggestion that I'm not at all sanguine that we'll go through this committee meeting here, but why don't we just take our stand right now and support it and send it to the council and let the council as a whole respond to it and take a position, because then we're ready to go if it ever comes up and we don't have to pull an emergency meeting.
This, in my opinion, is the type of legislation that will cause a lot of anxiety in a community that already has enough anxiety. I don't see the emergency necessity of this right now, and so watching it to see where it goes is more preferable to me.
Well, to get things going, I'm going to move that we support this on a one level of both the bills, and let's vote on it now. And if it doesn't, if the rest of the committee thinks watch is good, then watch will be good. So that's my motion. But I don't have a second.
Oh, why don't we hold off on that, Tom, and we'll give you a chance to do that again. Why don't we keep it on watch, but be fully prepared to pull us together. I mean, Tom makes a really good point. We can do it now, do it later. I think there'll be questions from council about why don't you get this one to us? And if that's the case, that'll help us figure out where we want to go with this. This will come up, I'm sure, at a meeting of the city council. So why not? Let's see where this is headed. But I think it's helpful if this is going to just sit there. I mean, I have testified in favor of these bills from an education point of view. And about all, they never go anywhere. About all you do is get get a lot of people worked up and nothing happens. And this was trying to keep guns out of schools and stuff like that. I mean, couldn't be any easier, you would think, but good Lord.
So, Mr. Mayor, I take it you're advocating for the watch position and
I am.
Get together. Okay, so.
Yeah, I think I think it's, for me, it's perfectly reasonable to watch it, but I don't think we can watch it forever.
Yeah, well, then that's fine. I mean, I didn't get a second to my motion, so it looks like we are going to watch it, and that's,
okay.
But we need to move as quickly as we can when it comes up.
Yeah, that's the main thing, I think, is that we can take a stand. I just like to know a little more about where we are headed. And I think we have to at least contemplate Mark's comments to us about the legal implications of this and what are we biting off here in terms of just the challenges and stuff.
Justin, I see that you really want to weigh in on this topic.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why don't we, if we're in this watch position, I can simply call Clem and get a sense from him, and or if Councilor Hoy wants to, to your original question, maybe you and I just get on a call with Clem, or if any of the councilors want to get on that call and we just ask him what his thought or what his thinking and time frame is going to be, that certainly will give us more information to revisit the issue.
Yeah, if he isn't serious about this moving forward, then, you know, we're not going to push it. I mean, we will not make it happen. We need him to be very clear he's going to move this thing forward. I think that's
Mr.
really
Mayor,
important.
I've
Yeah.
spoken with him personally after the stuff in the
Yeah.
park, walking by the house, and then he also came to the SCAN neighborhood meeting via Zoom and was pretty adamant is the wrong word, but wanted to push it forward, realizing that we've got the same problems politically that Justin's talking about, but he still wants to push it. So
Okay.
I'd like to be in that phone call too, Justin and Courtney. And Courtney, I'll try to look at my emails more often.
Why don't we try?
Everybody still okay with watch this, or would you like to put it to council?
I'm
Well-
good with watching it for now, but being nimble enough to take a position should the need arise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agree.
Lewis, same deal?
Okay. So
Okay. Well, we'll see this again. I hope probably sooner rather than later. Okay, what else you got, Courtney?
Justin, did you have something else to add? Sorry.
I'm 8 minutes over. Hopefully these other attorneys on this meeting covered me. Thanks you guys. I'll Nikki will be on and I'll double back if I can here in a few minutes.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Later.
The next two bills that we'd like to talk about, thank you, by the way, for that conversation. The next two bills there are three, relate to our unsheltered neighbors. And this has to do with House Bill 3115, which we've spoken to you about in the past. It presents a working compromise between the League of Oregon Cities and Oregon Law Center, as well as I think the Association of Oregon Counties is still involved. The other is House Bill 2367, which is being referred to as the Right to Rest bill. And the last is Senate Bill 410, and that has to do with storage of belongings. And I think Mark is still up because these bills have a good sound legal analysis that we'd like to share with you just as background for you to consider your position. Mark?
Thank you. We talked a little bit about House Bill 3115 last time, and as Courtney mentioned, it is designed to be a compromise bill. I recommend a neutral position largely because it is the speaker's bill. It is designed to be a compromise bill. There are some things about the bill that concern me. Most notably, it's going to statutorily embody constitutional precepts, cruel and unusual punishment precepts, which has been what has been the court's guiding post for ordinances which regulate sidewalk. I'm just going to call it sidewalk conduct type of thing, sit lie. I'm just going to use that vernacular because it's what the council is familiar with. And it's a developing body of law. Now, granted, this sort of says reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, which is what the court looks at, but there are some things within the bill that are statutory. One, it is going to extend what has normally been a criminal law analysis to also ordinances which only impose civil penalties. The first time we saw that was in the most recent case out of Eugene against Grants Pass. It was the first time that we saw a court move that analysis to purely civil penalties and not an ordinance that imposed criminal sanctions. So that's one area where this bill is going to extend things. It also allows for bringing a cause of action even if a person hasn't been cited for violating an ordinance. So it's going to give groups, entities, the ability to sort of look at what the regulations are in various jurisdictions and determine if they feel that there's an ordinance that would violate this and sue, bring action, and join the cities from enforcing them, even if no one's been cited. And so that's another area which is unique that this bill will create. So But again, this is the speaker's bill, and it was the result of working groups coming together to try and craft something. And so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah, Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mark, now I'm talking lawyer to lawyer. I appreciate the analysis, and I'm curious about what you talked about the case you said in Eugene, or I presume you mean the federal court in Eugene,
Yes.
coming out of Grants Pass. And so that's a district court decision that has already applied the criminal analysis, cruel and unusual, et cetera, to the civil stuff we're talking about.
Yes, Counselor.
Okay.
And it didn't get appealed. That issue didn't get appealed.
That was my next question.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and I think, forget, I don't want to speak too far. My understanding was that in part, this work group was designed to resolve that. And I can't say for sure, but I don't believe it's going to get appealed because of
this.
That's where I don't want to go too far.
Okay. So. But what you're telling me is within the District of Oregon, the Federal District of Oregon, which is the whole state, that's the law now.
In one application, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the only application we've had. And then I'm also interested in the, I don't know, I know there's a word for it, but it escapes me. The theoretical application of litigation. I haven't been personally harmed, but I might be in the future. So therefore I can go in and discuss it in a lawsuit. That's basically what you're saying, right?
This is specifically enabling entities to file for,
without a specific plaintiff.
Exactly.
Without somebody who is the test case who walks in.
Right.
Okay, so I have strong feelings about the homelessness and everything else, but I also have strong feelings about certain legal aspects of all this. So I'm fine with a neutral on this, just to see where it's going, looking at it from a purely legal standpoint, not so much a political standpoint.
Mark, could you work off a specific example as to what this would look like if this passed? And I'm thinking of what we've got going right now on Liberty Street along Rite Aid. What does that mean in terms of application of our ability to move people from that location or make available to them an alternative location? That does that fit the time, place, manner, or what can we do?
So one thing that I believe it's going to be problematic is we're not going to be able to have a citywide ban. One of the areas that's really evolving is what is a reasonable time, place, and manner, especially when you get into populations that are going to have transportation issues. One of the things that this bill also does is say when you're doing your totality of the circumstances analysis, you have to include looking at it from the position of a unsheltered individual. So I think we're probably going to see, if this passes, it would be my guess, since we can't say, that not only is it going to require that there be access to shelter, but that access to shelter be either where they can get to it. So we can't just put it on the outskirts of town,
right.
far away. It's gonna have to be meaningful opportunities for them to access shelter, and not just places to be, but also places to be and have protection from the elements, some type of covering, some type of ground covering. And that's really where I get less clarity, is how I can see different courts viewing it very differently. What is minimum protection from the elements? Is it a full tent and opportunity for heating and things like that, or is it a sleeping bag and ground cover? But at a minimum, I think we're going to have opportunities for individuals to rest where they can access those areas meaningfully.
So what are you saying then about, I have a specific example in mind. Does that continue under this and get more crowded? Does Rite Aid or their landlord have an obligation to provide the cover you're talking about?
Well, this is just,
I'm not very clear yet.
I'm sorry, Mayor, forgive me for speaking over you. It's specifically public property.
Yeah.
So not private property. So this does not increase or diminish a private landlord from regulating their own property. It's purely public spaces.
Okay, so they're on our sidewalk. That's a public space. The cover is because of the building next to it. I'm just feeling like we went through this sit-lie really because we had such a god-awful mess down there. If you haven't been down there lately, it's building again. Can we regulate that by offering alternative sites or not? I'm not understanding. And then what's the quality of the site? Is it got to be a heated location or what? How do we get them off our downtown streets?
I think what I'm hearing, what I read is that, yes, we can regulate it, but the alternative has to be a substantial alternative, not just, we say that you have an opportunity to go elsewhere. You have to actually provide a space that is meaningful.
That's kind of what we did, didn't we, when we passed that thing, was we're going to have a covered space.
I think
does it have to be comparable or better than they were in? I mean, can we say, hey, we've got a better space for you and force them to move? Because that's one of the things we run into. What we're starting to get down to is a resistant population that doesn't want to move anywhere else, even if it's better.
The way I understand it is, yes, we can regulate, but it's going to have to not just be different. It has to meet certain requirements.
I agree with Chris on this, and the phrase totality of circumstances is a phrase from criminal law, and it's not used in looking backwards. Did the police have the right to do what they did in a particular situation?
What can we do on Liberty Street then, Tom?
Yeah.
What does that allow us to do?
I don't know. That's why I think from a legal point of view, we ought to watch this and not take a position.
Okay.
And I don't want to go neutral yet, but I'd still just like to watch, because I agree with Councilor Hoy's analysis. We're going to have to provide something, and it's going to be up to each individual court where a suit is brought, looking at the totality of the circumstances. Right. Where were they? What did we provide? How do we get from where they were to where the place where we provide them? I mean, it could be very extensive, or it could not, depending on individual courts and what the totality of the circumstances is.
Well, I think one thing I'd really like to know, Mark, at some point, is you take a look at our sit-lie ordinance and its impact, and whether or not it would work under this, or what would our obligation be to make it work? What do we have to do to make it work? I think we thought we found it, which was a covered, or something like it. I don't think that's been the reality of it, but what's left here? Like we've got 30 people living down there on Liberty Street. We want them out of there. Can we say, well, we opened up the pavilion at the state fairgrounds. You're going to have to go there, at least during the period it's open, and that would be accepted as a reasonable alternative. What does that alternative look like that we need to start looking for in order to try to keep our downtown streets from looking like Liberty Street looks, which is a dump right now?
And if it weren't full, that might be reasonable, but it's full.
Right.
So That's
Well,
not-
no, but the first night it wasn't full, the first night. And we could have demanded they move. And I think we'd have had, I just be honest with you, I think we'd have had a whole bunch of people say, nah, don't think so. We're going to go over here and live. And the question is, do we have any coercive power to aim them toward an even better location than a sidewalk? What's this start to look like? And because that's going to be a lot of our planning as we try to deal with some of the impacts of homelessness is what can we do, you know?
I think part of what I was hearing in some of those work group sessions over the summer months when we were talking about some of these details with the League of Oregon Cities and the Oregon Law Center is that there remain some terms in the draft bill that are still less than clear and create some disadvantages to imagining what the implications. For example, reasonable time, place, and manner. Reasonableism is still kind of an open question, and I'm sure there are others. And Mark, I don't know if the liability issue has ever been resolved to date, but just to be clear, this pertains to public property and having adequate alternative shelter by 2023. And I think it also it opens many more avenues for people who may be ancillary to this issue raising suit. So it gives a lot more standing to a lot more people. Is that true, Mark?
Yes.
So there are many things that we don't know. The things that we do know are concerning from a legal perspective, which I think is your point, Councillor Anderson, and yet it represents a working compromise sponsored by the Speaker's office. And so here we are.
Well, it also is giving us some direction as what our homeless goals are going to look like. We're either going to try to meet them, or the law seems to be describing a solution. We're going to have a couple of years to do it. We may want to understand what it is we have to do. Might be really helpful. And it doesn't sound like this bill does much to help us, give us direction in that way. If we know what they have to have, we could at least begin working on it. That's been one of the problems with this changing law all the time because of the courts. We never know quite where we got to end up. It does sound like we can keep our sit lie in place and continue our current policy of chasing them around town until 2023. Do I understand that right? That seems like that's a really brilliant legislative approach.
Well, and I would add to that, Mr. Mayor, that this sounds like the compromise that Mark was talking about is great. All the parties got together, but not all the parties who are parties to this situation have agreed to this. Maybe these people say we won't appeal, but it's going to get appealed.
Yeah.
Especially under anybody who wants to can say, I might be affected by this. Therefore, even if I haven't personally been affected, I can sue to establish it, which is another reason why I say we just watch. Because if
I'm
it comes out,
just watching. I'm just really concerned about it.
Yeah, I am too. If it comes out, if it passes, we've got a little bit more of a guidance, but whatever passes is going to get, not much. I said a little bit, but whatever passes is going to get challenged in court.
And there's a hearing coming up on Tuesday on this, a public hearing.
It's when?
Tuesday.
I'm sorry.
Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah, Jim.
Well, for the sake of time, I think there's a group of 3 bills that we're talking about. House Bill 3115, House Bill 2367, and Senate Bill 410. I'm struggling to see the drastic difference between the 3 and why we would oppose 2 and not the other.
If I may.
Yeah.
So House Bill that we were just discussing, I'm sorry, is it 3115? Is a slightly different posture. It's speaker's bill. It's designed to be, in theory, a compromise. House Bill 2367, I'm not sure who's behind this bill, This bill gives a lot more affirmative, I don't know if I want to say rights, but it certainly places a lot more affirmative restrictions on the city. It affirmatively establishes via statute that unsheltered individuals have a right of privacy in their property when left in public spaces, which is a little bit different than what the law allows for under search and seizure law and various other things. It gives them statutory protections basically to do all of the things that one would normally do in their living environment, to be allowed to do it in the public space. It requires the city, when it's reasonable to do so, that if they're going to relocate individuals that are sheltering in vehicles and removing them from a particular area, let's say our parks, that we need to provide adequate other space for them to put their vehicles within the city whenever we're able to do so. I don't know if this bill has any traction. I saw it come through. It was not one that I had been hearing about like 3115 was. So I don't know if it's something that's ever going to move, or if 3115 is going to be the bill that moves forward. But there are some concerns about this bill and its impact on the city, which is why I had recommended an oppose, but I don't know if we need to do so at this time. Regarding the other bill, which is Senate Bill 410, it's a resource issue. This requires situations when the city is removing a campground under its authority to do following the provisions, that not only do we have to store the property, which we already do, and we do, but it's going to require us to store that property, I believe, within 6 miles of wherever the campground was, within a certain distance, both from the location of the campground as well as public transportation, and require us to maintain that property not for 30 days, but now for 90 days. And the city is geographically large as Salem. I can see that. I understand the spirit of the bill. I just can see it becoming a very difficult thing for the city to meet its obligations under that.
Tom?
Yeah, this, I'm just looking at these now, both the bills, because I was a little remiss in getting to this meeting. But 410, the Senate bill, that to me is the equivalent of an unfunded mandate. We have to do all this other stuff. Here's all these onerous things that are coming down on the city, and maybe they're for, you know, good theoretical reasoning, but when it comes down to us, it's just like saying we have to have body cams on every cop, and then they don't give us the funding to do that. So I'm definitely agree with the oppose on 410. I'm a little less certain about the other one we talked about, the 2367. And Mark, I think you were saying this might be one that you would be comfortable with us just taking a watch status as opposed to an opposed. Is that kind of what you said on that?
Again, I don't know if it's moving. If it's not moving, I'm comfortable with a watch.
Okay. Well, then could we just leave this one on the same sort of way we left the two gun bills, you know, that we'll watch them, and if something comes up, then because this is a tough decision. This bill is a tough decision for me. You know, you leave something in a public area, you don't have any expectation of privacy. But what this is saying is now, if you don't have a home, you're in a public area, you do have an expectation of privacy. And I can just see all sorts of unintended consequences coming off that particular decision in that bill.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Chris?
Thank you. Also, if you read 410, it's horribly drafted. I mean, it talks only about cities. It doesn't talk about what happens outside of a city. It talks about transit but it doesn't really define what that means. Like, okay, does it mean, it's just a horrible draft. And so it would need some significant amendments to clean it up for it to be anywhere near palatable. I mean, for not even talking about, the substantive issue of the cost. So yeah, I'm good with, I'm good with.
I would
it.
just
On the other
suspect
one-
this is an advocacy group out of Portland put this together. That's
Yeah,
what it
Mr. Mayor,
sounds like.
It's
this
clearly
is,
a Portland-centric bill.
This
Yeah.
is Senator Gorsuch out of Gresham on 410, a freshman senator, came over from the House. So, if we had to lay odds, I wouldn't think things would be great there. Flipping over to the House bill that Mark was talking about, that's 3 freshman legislators from Washington County and 1 in Portland. So
Okay.
I think it's a steep climb, but we should certainly keep our eye on it.
Do you have any sense, Justin, that we can talk to the speaker about her bill if we can identify any minor changes that would make this a little easier to work with?
Yeah, we can certainly have those conversations with her. Now, that being said, there was a big work group, there was a big task force that all got together to work on this kind of grand compromise. So we'd have to do a little, okay, we've been here and there, but we can certainly voice those opinions to her if it tweaks it and makes us a little more comfortable with it. But
Yeah, and I'm
there's
talking
a lot
about
of force
minor.
behind that one.
Yeah, just some specific change, just make it maybe a little more workable. If we can figure out what makes this kind of stuff workable for a city that's been left by the state to deal with all the things they've abandoned,
Just to be sure everyone's aware, the League of Oregon Cities is not going to be taking a position on this. They've participated in, or maybe they're supportive, I don't recall, but they've participated in all the development of it and have led that work, inviting cities to participate all summer. So what we have is the best that we could get in those conversations.
I agree with you. I mean, the league does what the league does, but we might be able to do some things that we do a little bit differently. If we can, Justin, I'd just like you to explore it, see if there's, particularly if with Mark and Tom can figure out where these legal problems might be and where we could find some openings and maybe do some just minor corrective action that makes it a little bit clearer than this does. This still sounds like Portland.
We just need to be a little careful because it's the speaker's bill politically.
Oh, well, you know what? So that's one vote.
I agree. I can always have
Okay.
those conversations. We will nuance.
Much more concerned about Clem's bill than I am the speaker's bill. Right?
We will nuance it.
So just to clarify, we're retaining the watch on House Bill 2367, and you'd like to move forward an opposed position on Senate Bill 410, or are we?
If we have to, yeah. I bet it doesn't get a hearing.
Thank you so much.
And tell me again, where are we on 315? What's the recommendation?
I heard that we were going to be watching, and as a committee, you've asked us to do a little bit of some more analysis to see what or where we would have flexibility around any kind of sit-lie locally. And I think Mark was taking good notes in that portion of our conversation. And then you've asked us to kind of investigate where or how there might be some movement with the speaker directly.
I'll tell you something that'd be really helpful would be to have the staff describe what this does to the local conditions we're experiencing. What's it do to us? What exactly is the outcome in terms of our existing policies, existing ordinances, our goals? Because if it's a speaker's bill, we think it's going to pass, we got to understand what it's going to do to us. And I think that to me would be really helpful.
And Mr. Mayor, we should be able to have the conversations with the Senate president if it does pass and gets over to his side.
Right.
There's always other ways to catch it on our side, obviously with the Senate president being our senator. So
right, and
that
he's
would be
not
great to have
nearly
that
as sympathetic to this problem as the speaker is right now. And I think we ought to be able to talk to him in some detail about what this will look like on the ground in his community. He's really interested in that. He's asked. I mean, he'd like to know.
For sure. So I'll work with Mark and Courtney and whoever else and get that information over to his chief of staff.
Let us look at it first.
Assuming
There might be some-
it's going to get over there. I think strategically that's how we have to think.
Okay,
So I'm mindful of time. We are over time, and we do have several other bills that we wanted to bring forward to you
okay.
to discussion.
Go ahead.
We have two bills that are environmental related to House Bill 2180, which is about electric vehicles, or is it about land use? Eunice?
EV.
EV, excellent. And 2842, can you talk a little bit about those, Eunice?
Yeah, I can do House Bill 2180 would require new multifamily developments with 5 or more units, commercial properties, commercial buildings, and mixed-use buildings to essentially provide the capacity for EV for at least 20% of parking spaces. It has since been amended since I did the review to say you need the conduit system, but you can either have the electrical service, a space to add the electrical service, or a location on the property to do remote installation. In any case, it has had a hearing already in a work session.
It passed out unanimously on a work session.
Yeah,
Right.
what's wrong with that?
So
Okay.
are
What
you
else you got?
concurring with our position? Great, we'll take that forward to council.
Okay.
One is actually a review that Jessica did for us, and it has to do with grants for grants for landlords. I think Jessica, could you do a little bit on that for us? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Residents. Yes.
No problem. Senate Bill 330 is just kind of it gives landlords an option to help offset that past due tenant rent, for which there are programs right now where the landlords can apply. And sometimes the programs pay 80 cents on the dollar, some of them pay 90 cents on the dollar, and all of them come with different program guidelines. Some are federal, some are state and local. This particular Senate bill would allow for just one other option for the landlords to help keep tenants in place, which would be using basically a tax credit. And they would be able to offset all charges that may be passed due from tenants, not just rent. So many of the other programs apply to rent only, not the total balance due. And so this just offers the owners of rental property one additional tool to offset that loss in income during the pandemic.
Who sponsored that bill? You know?
I'll have to double check on that one.
Yeah, Chris.
Thank you. I'm a little bit confused by your statement that'll allow landlords to keep people in their units during the pandemic. This offers a tax credit in future years. I'm not sure how that applies. It just seems like to me that it allows landlords to recoup some costs, but I don't see that it actually translates to keeping people in their homes. Can you clarify that?
Absolutely. So they would have to forgive the amount of the balance owed for the tenants, and that's how they would be able to offset on their taxes. So there is proof that's required where they show that they've provided the tenant a notice that, hey, we're going to use your balance owed and we're going to offset it on our income for taxes. And in return, your balance is basically taken to zero. So it will help those tenants basically stay in place. And I like this particular bill because it talks about all charges. So for example, if there was pet rent or parking or any of those charges that remained outstanding, even during the moratorium, and let's say a landlord applied for the rent assistance for rent only, that still leaves that balance of those other charges and the outstanding. And come June, or whenever they vote that the balloon payments are going to come due, basically, those payments will still be due and could still be a barrier and cause an eviction for those tenancies.
Understood. My other little question is more process. This seems like it's a little bit outside our lane, even though it might be a good idea. It doesn't seem like it's a bill that we would typically get involved with either way. And so I'm just a little bit.
We
about
We
that.
may have picked it up in the COVID recovery element. And so if you would like to just stay, abstain from a position, that's fine. We just picked it up because COVID recovery resources was such a priority for the legislative committee and the council. So it's up to you again.
I don't necessarily mind taking a position, but it seems a little bit inconsistent with our desire to kind of stay in our lane, is my only concern.
And I think the Housing Authority is looking at this from the perspective of preventing homelessness, potentially.
Sure. No, I understand that.
Okay.
So we were proposing support. Would you care to be involved, or should we just keep it at the staff level?
Staff level, do you think?
Perfect.
Thank you.
And we glossed over a quick one that I just wanted to refer to, and this was House Bill 2842, and it's grants to residents for indoor air quality improvements. And that again is up to you. We put it in as a support too for your consideration.
What's the downside? I mean, we'll give you some money so you can have clean air. Let me see. I'm trying to think. How do you say no to that?
Where does the money come from?
Jessica?
Yep, sorry about that. The grant funding would be through Oregon Health Authority. It would be a program that we could apply for, or landlords could apply for or tenants to rehabilitate their homes and have better indoor air quality.
Okay.
We'll just.
Does anybody want to, do you care? Or?
Yeah, I'm a little confused because I thought, Courtney, you said we supported it too, and I'm looking at it, and unless I'm reading the wrong one, it just says we took no position, no priority. Has that changed since I'm looking at the?
Oh, I'm sorry. We must not have clicked those two boxes in the review system. It's again a question to you. I presumed support too based on the conversation.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, and I agree with that. Basically, I see Councilor Hoy's concerns, but I also see what Jessica Blakely has said, that that's really where we're going to avoid making somebody else it's a homelessness issue potential.
Thank you. The last three bills are a really odd array of collection of things, and so we'll just take them one at a time if you don't mind.
Okay.
First one is House Bill 2015, and I would look to Josh Eggleston to talk about this. This just would give us an opportunity to collect more as it relates to the marijuana tax. Josh?
Yeah, so this bill, basically the only change is right now we're limited to 3%. This would increase the limit to 10%. And cities are looking to it in response to Measure 110, that for the city of Salem is reducing our ongoing revenue by about $700,000 each year.
Sounds fine to me. What do you think? Okay.
I can't help but make one comment. The black market in this product is alive and well in Oregon, and we do have to be careful about the price point. The other thing that, quite frankly, concerns me the most is if you keep charging me when I go in the store, I'm simply going to buy seeds from you one time and start my own plants, and that will affect the aroma around the city. So there are unintended consequences.
So you are looking at starting your own plants? What are you saying?
I wouldn't disclose that even if I was.
Okay, I wouldn't. I just wanted to check. Okay, what else you got?
Then we. Sorry?
For that. We're for that.
Yes, I gathered.
Got that?
The next is House Bill 2887, and this is a bridge district bill. And this one, all we've done is copied and pasted a position that the city council approved in the last long session. And so that's available for your review. There is no true compression impact according to finance. And so if you'd like, we can continue to maintain that position of supporting the bridge district bill.
It says neutral.
It says neutral.
Oh, sorry. We'll click the right box next time.
Okay, so we're for it? Okay.
Thank you. And then the last one has to do with dog training facilities. And Eunice, I really am going to need your help on this. It's House Bill 2645, and it's a land use bill.
Yeah, the dog training, I'm not so sure about. It's the part that we want to oppose is that it would allow people to move their property lines through a court without any consideration of if those lots are actually could meet any sort of zoning land use essentially. So it kind of takes us out of the process, and so we would like to oppose that. It's a repeat bill from a couple of years ago, I think.
It's had 2 public hearings so far. It's a Representative Post bill. He's the only sponsor.
Okay. Sure.
Okay, thank you so much. If you have time and capacity, I know that Jason Pulley has a Senate bill that he wants us to understand quickly.
Okay.
It's called Senate Bill 395, and I'm sorry it was not in your packet. As you know, legislative stuff moves fairly quickly. So Jason, could you talk to us a little bit about Senate Bill 395, please?
Yeah, and quickly, I don't want to take any more of your time, but Senate Bill 395 is being referred to as the Safe Routes for All bill. Essentially, the main thing it does is it requires that the amount of money that we get from the state highway fund raises from 1%, it goes to 5%. That money has to be dedicated for bikeways or bike paths and footpaths in any construction. So the troubling part about this is it adds in, so currently the way the law is, any road that is constructed, reconstructed, or relocated is required to have, an analysis for a bike path or a footpath.
Right.
It brings into play now any resurfacing project. So that is all of our maintenance projects now have to be considered for adding bike lanes or footpaths. So you can just imagine how that would complicate what our operations crews do just when they're doing simple, surface reseals or, just a small lift of asphalt. It does set a cap if the cost of adding those paths is greater than 20% of the project cost, you can get an exemption, but it reads like you have to get an exemption for each one of those projects. So I don't think that we want to necessarily not support this or come out in opposition. I just want to get your opinion and allow us to work on that resurfacing piece mainly. See if we can team with some other cities and the LOC and get those things, pulled out.
Would this be comparable to the way it goes with the ADA things we've had to do each time we go in on a street? Would that be kind of what this does, is sort of set up that kind of a program?
Exactly, Mayor. It would be the exact same thing, yes.
Okay.
I think, Jason, the difference, right, is that when it's a new street, we can talk about property acquisition to have enough space for all of those facilities to occur within the street space. But when it's a resurfacing project, we're not likely to be acquiring new right-of-way.
Right, you wouldn't be budgeted for that type of activity. And then in areas, where you just don't have the room, to put in a bike lane. It's unclear how this bill would allow. I mean, there are some exemptions built in, but it just feels like it's going to be an administrative burden trying to get over those hurdles every time you want to do a small maintenance project.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I, of course, am all in favor of the 5% jump from 1% to 5%, but I do see the concerns about the resurfacing project, and perhaps we might want to look at it not just individual resurfacing, but resurfacing as a whole, because it's going to be very hard. You're going to go above 20% if you're resurfacing a street. There's no room for a bike path or a ped path. And you're going to have to acquire and build and everything else. That's going to be much more than 20%. So I think we're okay, but it's if we have to look at each individual resurfacing, that's where the only place that I have my problems.
Okay. Chris?
Thank you. I'm good with you working on amendments, although I want to reiterate my being troubled by having to take or being asked to take or have an opinion on a bill that I haven't read. I trust your recitation of what's included, but I prefer to be able to read those also. So I'm good with, from what you've said, of getting the resurfacing out of there. But I would like the chance to read it before actually taking a position.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for all of us to just get a look at it. Maybe you could send it out to us or send out your summary of it. But I think what Chris is saying is that at least on the one that you have pointed, the concern you pointed out to us, no problem if you want to go in and try to work it a little bit, have Justin work, whatever your process is to get some exceptions on the resurfacing.
And I mean, the intent is to bring it back to this committee once,
Right.
you know, we ran it. We didn't have the time. It kind of hit hard on Thursday.
Yeah.
So I just wanted a little direction before we bring it back and actually get council.
I think we'd be interested in it. I mean, there's a lot of interest in bike and pedestrian paths and in making sure we're resurfacing our streets and not trying to, not ending up with massive cost drivers too. So there's a way to make that. I thought Tom described really well, which is if you've got a 20%, you really can't, getting over that 20% will be very quick on a small resurfacing project where you've got to put in a bike lane and you've got no right of way.
And I will point out that the financial forecast shows that it would cost, it would take $2.7 million away from routine street maintenance over the course of our 5-year forecast. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not insignificant, but it's obviously we're used to working on tight dollars on our streets program.
Okay, well, I think you got a general idea. We'll get a look at it.
So that's really all we have left. So I'll just notice that there is some amendment occurring around House Bill 2488 that Eunice is watching. And so we'll bring that back to you as well when we regroup. Eunice, do you want to speak a little bit to that just quickly?
Sure, that's the bill that would create a new land use goal related to climate justice and equity. And it would have implications on local governments. And so an amendment should drop today. There is a hearing on Monday, but I can bring that back when the amendment's out.
Okay, great. Yeah, Tom.
On the Climate Action Task Force, I think I'm the only person here on that group, where we have really been having some in-depth and serious discussions about the equity aspect of climate change. So I'm very interested in this, and to the extent if we take a position of testifying on it, because we've spent a whole lot of time on how, you know, it's great for upper class white folks to take care of climate change, but it's going to be sometimes on the backs of lower income people of color.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you, again, where are we on Senate Bill 330? That was one of those landlord bills.
Right. And the way I understood it based on your conversation is that Senate Bill 330 would be one that we would take with support and a 2.
Great. Okay.
Correct?
Good. I just wanted to make sure I understood where we were on that. Thank you.
I have a whole bunch of crazy note making. I can run through the numbers and if that would be of interest to you as a wrap. But what I want to make sure we're clear on is that we will follow up at the next legislative committee meeting on a little bit more information about what it would require for us to be ready should House Bill 3115 pass. And that's again the speaker's bill on essentially Boise Martin, but
not just right. I think it's telling us what it looks like for us. I mean, right now we have a sit-lie ordinance. Is it out, or is it out in 2023? Or, you know, it's that kind of thing would be really helpful, because the emails we get are about specific situations. And you almost want to be able to say there's a bill, the state wants to make it worse or make it better or whatever, you know.
Understood. Yes.
I think as we talk to constituents, because it's just a fairly constant drumbeat about this issue. So I think we really have to be able to answer what's going on in terms of state legislation and not let the legislature just drive it. The other, you know, if you have contact with, you or Justin have contact with Representative Clem, if he wants to come visit with us about his bill, I'd sure, you know, it would be maybe helpful if he wants to just come say, look, you guys, here's what I think we ought to be doing, and I'm going to drive this thing home. I'd love to hear him say it rather than just hang it out and then walk away. I've seen that done so many times on these gun bills. That's just, you know, and it's always let somebody else solve the gun bill problem. They are masters at that one.
Sounds like Nikki.
No, by mental health. Every time you deal with mental health, think about how well they've done with that one when they walked away and turned it over to the counties and us.
Sounds like Nikki's already reached out to schedule that meeting.
Okay, great.
And so we'll be bringing back Senate Bill 395, which Jason just reported on, and the amendment to House Bill 2488, which Eunice just reported on. So we'll be bringing those back to you, and then you'll see a packet on your agenda for Monday night shortly.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else? We're adjourned.